Okay, this is a WPA Works Progress Administration, 1940. It was painted and it exists today in our Riverside post office. It's on the wall, and basically we just blocked it in, or Frank Pearson blocked it in to form the front cover. And it has scenes, that sort of suggest progress. Was before that, the locals called it Goat Town. So we have these goats running around, and that's in the mural. And this really looks like Mr. and Mrs. Bechtel, Catherine and Samuel Bechtel. The first railroad in New Jersey was the Camden Amboy, and this is the John Bull. The John Bull ran through Riverside. Probably it finally was operational probably in the mid 1830s. So this guy is actually in the Smithsonian, John Bull. So and then we found this over in London, England. It's actually a lithograph. It exists, and it shows Riverside from the shores of the Lanco, and you can see the Pavilion Hotel, which was demolished several years ago, and then we have St. Peter's Church. You can see the spire, which was demolished a few years ago, and then the Moravian. So we really had a good supply of information as the writings from Alice suggest. I would say Alice runs a meeting where we usually have a speaker. Okay, and you've been one of our speakers over the years, and I usually did one PowerPoint presentation a year for about 10 years. So I had all these different research projects, mini research projects on families, generally families, okay? So I believe it was in 2017 I did Conrad Yearly, and Conrad Yearly was sort of like a land agent for Samuel Bechtel. He was a Philadelphia guy, Kensington guy, and he would bring German immigrants either by train or by boat over to Progress and introduce them to our town with the idea of buying property, okay? So there was one of the researchers besides Alice Smith was a lady named Mary Yearly Flanagan, and she basically over the years had collected a lot of information on the Yearlys, and that's one of the featured families in the book, the Yearlys. Okay, so we only had like 30 minutes to do this PowerPoint at the meeting because we have a meeting, okay, and we could have went on and on and on because we had all this research information from Mary. So I said to Alice, we have this, these documents, we have these pictures, we have this information. Why don't we sort of expand it and look towards maybe putting something together that's larger? And I had something in mind like a magazine, so then we started looking at it, and I said, my God, we have all this information. Why don't we do it really right? And so in 2017, Mary Yearly and myself, we started working with Alice, and I would say, what do we have on, let's say, the Wolfschmidts? What do we have on the deeds in terms of Progress? Who owned this lot? Who owned that lot? So we started collecting all this information, and I, every day would be up in my computer, and I'd be working on my Word. And so it started getting bigger and bigger, and I said, holy smoke, I said, this thing could be a book, this could be something, So, Alice said, well, we really should do it right and put footnotes, we should reference the source material. So we got underway in 2017 and started making it bigger, and then I got lucky, and some fellow, volunteered his wife to be the editor. Joe Palumbi volunteered his wife, Ellen Palumbi, and she did a terrific job. I mean, we worked, I would send her stuff and it would come back and she said, no, this has to change. We're repeating it, we need to move it here, we need to move it there. And then Frank Pearson had been coming and doing some research on his great-great-great-grandfather, Joseph Pearson, who owned all the farmland where the watch case property is, where the town, the town hall is. That was all his farm. So he said, I have all this stuff. In fact, one of the documents, I don't know if you noticed, we actually have a marriage record from his I don't know how many great-grandparents it was, but William Franklin signed it, and he was the governor in like 1892, I think it is, where it was officially recorded as the marriage. And I think it was 500 pounds they had to pay as Quakers. So we had this Frank Pearson come forward and he said, I want to do this. I can do everything and get this thing ready, so we don't need an editor or a publisher. All we need is a printer. So after I and Ellen and I got done with our writing and rewriting, we sent it to him, and he put the footnotes in, he put the different pictures, and he formatted the pages. So it was really a combined effort of a lot of people. And then there were ladies that worked over in the museum over in Riverside at the Historical Society that they were filing things and pulling things. So it was a little bit easier on myself just to collect the information and to write about it. My brother was the assistant principal and athletic director at Herman Maurer, and I went there one day and I saw Bob Kenny. I don't know if you know Bob Kenny, okay? He was past president of the Historical Society, and I made the mistake of saying it to him, and this was probably in 2010. I said, Bob, I'm looking at genealogy and I need information on the Winkle specs. And he said, well, why don't you come to one of our meetings? We meet monthly at the Methodist Community Center. Why don't you come? So I made the mistake of asking the question, then coming to a meeting, and first thing you know, I'm the secretary. So, that's how I got started. I did a PowerPoint on the Winkle specs. I think it was 2011, and approximately we had 55 Winkle specs. We did a class picture that we have, and there were so many Winkle specs I didn't even know that they existed, and that's how I got started with doing the PowerPoints, researching different families, and going from that point forward. I did not do the translation of the Progress Turners minutes, but a classmate of mine named Mark Hall was responsible for that translation. He went to school in Germany after we graduated from high school, and he lived there. So he would come home to see his 90-year-old mother on a regular basis, and I saw him at our 50th class reunion and said, he asked me what I was doing. I said, I'm pretty interested in the Historical Society. I said, we're doing a project. So he said, well, I'd like to help out on that. So one of the big things we had was, in Riverside, there's a group called the Riverside Turners, okay? And it so happens that they got started in 1860 when they were called the Progress Turners. And we had copies of these minutes from 1860 to 1875 with a slight break for the Civil War, where no one knew what it said. We just knew that there were dates, names, and it was in German. It was in a writing called Current, I believe it's called. It's a German form of writing that doesn't exist today. So it was a little more technical in sense of an A is not an A today. It's a different figure. So we found out that the Pennsylvania Historical Society had the original document. So we went over and made a deal with them to, if they would give us a high definition copy of these minutes, of the minute book, we would give them the translation. So Mark Hall was one of the translators, a fellow from Denver, Colorado, Richard Krause. His family is the Dietrichs in Riverside, and he fantastic researcher, but he's also a good translator for us. And we had a father and son, Ralph Sonder. Dr. Ralph is deceased now, but he was born over in Austria, came to this country, and was actually in school when this type of writing was present. So those folks basically took the document, translated it into current German, and then Mark Hall then took it to the next level and did the translation into English. So we had all this thing that was going on. You know, Henry Garby was in there, and he was one of the original settlers, and we knew all the different types of things that were going on in people's lives. You know, what was going on in terms of health-wise, and how the organization was going. So we had these documents, tons of pictures, like of the German Singing Society. It's called the Manicore. And that was like the late 1800s, and then it sort of went out of business. And then in 1903, they built this huge hall next to the fire company that they had singing arrangements in it. So the Turners were there, the Manicore was there. So we have all this documented information, plus tons of different pieces of lives from Riverside that people have donated. That Alice, she's a terrific preserver of history. She has a filing system so that if you want something on X, Y, and Z, she knows where it is in the collection. Well, I would say there were so many interesting things. One of the things that struck me as the first school in this part of Burlington County was called the Westchester School, and it was, if you know where Chester Avenue is in the Delran Municipal Building, okay, across the street from them is an entrance to the back of Holy Cross Academy now. Where that entrance is was like, I believe it was sort of like 1805, something to that. This school was built. So there was this educational factor in Delran, and then in Riverside, back on Taylor Street in 1856, we had our first school. So there was a big red letter day for our town to actually have its own school. I would say the most interesting thing I ran across was probably when I went to the school board, and there was a construction of a school called the Carroll Street School, which is it's on one of the sides of the Spring Garden Park. It's on Carroll Street, that's why it's called. It was 1895, but very detailed information about how they decided where the school was going to be, how much they were going to spend, and the different votings that went on to actually establish, here we go, we're going to build this. And we found the architect of the building. We have pictures of that initial construction. So I would say that was the most, one of the, education, really. It was the Germans, they wanted their kids in school, and they built schools.